Hello, and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy podcast channel. My name is Jed. How are you going? Yesterday, or last episode, we explored all of the things we have been discovering about mastership. Mastership, the root relationship behind all things and relationships. In reality, perhaps. As a king is to his subjects, as a shepherd is to his sheep, as a ship captain is to his crewmates, etc., etc. What have we discovered is involved in mastership? What qualifies rulership, expertise? What's involved in knowing, knowledge? How is understanding used? Artfully? Who benefits? All of the things, all of the questions that are dismissed by the expression, everything is relative. You don't ask any of those questions, and if you do, you're answered with, well, all of those questions are just relative to whatever it is that you believe, or your perspective, or opinions. So, as we see, we can therefore recognize if what we are discovering is the use of understanding ourselves to discover the principles behind sets of terms and relationships. In reality, what we are discovering is art. That is, knowledge, mastership, and understanding used to benefit the subjects only, not the ruler. Not only is that art, that's also the natural law that Prometheus stole from Zeus to save humanity from extinction. Therefore, we can recognize that we need to understand this and expect and demand and facilitate this in our species if we are to prevent human extinction. That is, make sure that all of these conditions are met for anyone who seeks rulership over human souls, and anyone who doesn't, anyone who claims it's all relative, expertise is all relative to opinions and belief, qualification is all relative to belief, knowing is just belief, truth is just belief, any of these aspects or features are just belief, that is not only unjust, opposing art, it also breaks the natural law. And as we see, it sweeps death and destruction across our species, leading to our extinction. To be ruled by belief versus to be ruled by understanding. So, pretty neat. And we had fun taking all those elements and seeing if we could bring them together into a structure of our own understanding, so that we can recognize the key ideas and use them ourselves and recognize them ourselves in our own experience and in our own functioning. What did we use? Well, if analogy furnished us with all of the ideas, things, and relationships, dialectic allowed us to bring it all together in our own understanding and seeing. So, discovering fundamentally, analogy and dialectic is the functioning of understanding, the good thing that human beings can do. The opposition of the bad thing, it's all relative, or rulership via belief. So we brought it all together in a dialectic. Involved in that dialectic was defining and demonstrating. In other words, giving an example. We looked at a fantastic example where someone seeking rulership might not have had all of those qualities himself, but was a better kind of candidate, more open to reason and understanding than the others who are more loyal to beliefs. We call them fascists or conservatives or right-wingers. So someone worth voting for compared to the opposition, worth supporting, worth encouraging their further development. So he might not have met the conditions, but the interviewer seemed to be functioning according to that dialectic of mastership, having some intuition or understanding of the ideal, being able to definition, demonstrate, or judge what level of demonstration or level of sameness and difference or deviation from that ideal he was. Division was able to lead him through steps in the interview for the conclusion, to improve him, to make him better. And that also includes making the experience, or doing their best to make the experience fun and engaging so that they can return, which is what we do here as well. Philosophy and personal development isn't a one-off conversation, it's a relationship. It's a dialogue through time. You keep coming back. Your beliefs say stop the questions, stop the dialogue, let's have a fight instead, or a war instead, or a genocide instead. We say no, that's the abandonment of what it means to be human, the abandonment of the intelligible, or the abandonment of our purpose to follow the logos. So we go back to the conversation. And of course, that was part of the conclusion, to have a fun experience where he would come back to reason and understanding, and also come back to the interviewer perhaps in the future to continue to explore ideas together. In those steps of reasoning, the interviewer followed again the dialectic in exploring the idea that might benefit the subject. So that was our and all of that, her dialectic of the conversation within her dialectic of mastership was the demonstration stage in our dialectic of understanding mastery ourselves. It's dialectics all the way down, baby. That might sound complicated, so let's draw it on the board just in case. By the way, not only are we gaining understanding and participating in necessary, rational human activity, but we're also seeing there's kind of beauty in this. There is symmetry. There is a flow between levels. There's a symmetry between levels, which may reflect the principle of analogy itself that allows us to do this. In other words, as self unfolds to reality, self unfolds, or maybe we can call it the one self, because it's the principle of the single thing, the first thing, the one self, unfolds through likeness, a reflection of itself in some way, or reflecting its inherent intelligibility, the self logos that we ultimately seek ourselves in our return, inherent intelligibility, our ability to understand and know it, the rational structure that we can understand and know, the self logos, into reality or mind, being, and then that unfolds or creates via a kind of likeness, which means sameness and difference. So we see these primary principles, that is the physical world, so already in this simple model, we see the primary principles of one into many, for there to be anything. We see that there are parts or aspects, the inherent intelligibility, the pattern or parts within the whole and parts, the blueprints, the pattern. So here we have these primary ideas unfolding necessarily in any creation of any kind. We see the principle of likeness. And of course, it's not the same. There is some unlikeness, especially as we deviate from the Logos through allegiance to belief. Likeness itself means same and different. There is some sameness and some difference. That's what Logos means. And we could continue. You can see, well, there's some unfolding or motion, some rest. We are seeing the physical world of time, in time, non-physical world out of time. These seem to be the primary ideas. And therefore, this allows us to map our progress back in our return. So we see our purpose to purify our beliefs of the physical world. And that's the lesser. Oh, so we see the principles of lesser and greater unfold as well. Well, the principles of the ultimate oneself. The ultimate, the first cause, the principle or primary axiom unfold into a greater and lesser reflection. There are some primary ideas unfolding. So our job is to participate in these, to understand reality and understand our map back to purify beliefs or the lesser in our individual functioning, perfect our understanding to reach reality, which is of course our peak experience or the ideal mind itself. But also understanding can go beyond experience to reach the oneself by making ourselves more like or more the same and less different from those things. Because the more you are like something, the more you become. So now we go backwards through the unfolding of those terms. So we can recognize a set. So we can use analogy now to create a set, which has, of course, an ideal and terms. Has an ideal and terms in that set. The ideal seems to be, from this model, the one. That's not just one, it's also the one self. Which is interesting because our highest goal is also the most immediate. Before even your experience of states of mind, there's something experiencing it. So it's the most transcendent and the most imminent, which is curious. But to recognize that which is always there, attention itself, as the highest, most transcendent principle of the One, also the good and the true, we need to recognize its logos, the One Self logos. And we can therefore have the terms that unfold from the One. Oneness, manyness, or maybe more accurately we could say, yeah, that works. How about we say the highest experience of One, or the One that is. The One that is, and many. And then as we can rank hierarchically the sets with the terms within a set: whole, part, same, principle of same and different. Notice we're becoming less and less like a one. Like and unlike. We can keep going, but let's stay here for now, because we have enough terms to understand how to reach our purpose, fulfillment, meaning. The more we become like the ideal, the more we become the same as it. That we do by participating ourselves as a whole. In other words, to become more the same as the self logos, to have mastership over yourself as a whole in every aspect of yourself, to be following the logos, not just following the logos in your reasoning, but then chasing your desires to do kick puppies or something, exploit residents for profit, exploit, I don't know, human problems through marketing for profit. In other words, justice, to do it as a whole. And the more that you are the same as a whole, the more you are becoming a kind of one yourself, or one in existence, or a oneness, to the point where if you're completely like or the same or one, you're identical. It's that axiom or principle of identity, or in geometry it's called coincidence, the principle of coincidence. Things that are identical to each other are the same as each other. Therefore, we become more and more like the ideal. That's our perfection. If there is some sort of guide, then that guide or that master or ruler, that's how they guide us. And in participating in that guidance for our perfection through the hierarchy of terms becoming more and more the same and less different, to become eventually identical with the ideal, that's our, well, that's spiritual development, that's evolution, that's education, but that's also our participation in benefit. Therefore, when a master or ruler with mastership of these qualities functions to benefit us through our perfection in that through that hierarchy, that's called an art. So notice, when somebody says, rulership to benefit, show me one society that has done that. Meh. therefore it can't be done. Therefore we should murder children for the profit of the shareholders. We don't have to play that game. We don't have to point to a society that has done this. Maybe there hasn't been one. Who cares? A doctor may not be able to point to the ideal perfect human body. It may not exist in the physical world. He still has to use it and seek to reach it. Notice, nothing here is in the physical. Well, we are understanding the physical world itself, but nothing is here is from sense experience, from the physical world. Therefore, nothing here is an object of belief. Nothing we have said could be debated. Nothing we've said is a matter of opinion. Therefore, if we are participating in true universal principles that can be grasped through understanding and used for our benefit, for benefiting the subject, we are doing it. We are developing self-mastery in going through that reflection. You can't debate this. You either see it or you don't. Now, we did see that for human development, there is a counterforce opposing this benefit. In other words, our purpose should be to look for a master of, we saw last time, our conclusion, our ideal self-mastery is achieved by following the 4 axioms, analogy and dialectic. That was our conclusion from last episode. Therefore, we should find people who are seeking to follow those axioms, developing mastery of understanding, purification of beliefs and perfecting of understanding. To guide us so that we can benefit. We should be looking for dialecticians. Not only are people not looking for this, strangely enough, people get angry about this. So when we apply this standard to humanity, we can recognize that for human development, zoom in a bit. Cool, bud. Here a drop. There's my drop.
Boom. I love that.
Thank you. For human development, we require mastery of the truth, the ideal of the one self, logos, and of course mind logos, because there is that mean intermediary step of experiencing reality, the enlightenment experience. Oops. But because the nature of the human situation, deal, crisis, purpose, is that there is a counterforce opposing that, the false. True and false, there's our principles of greater and lesser, or greater and ultimate and lesser. The patho, logos, image and belief, image or mask, image and belief of those two things. of self and reality. In other words, say, hey, I want to, let's use the politician. I'm a politician. I want to create an ideal society for the development of, through the different terms of the development of the human soul. So we could say states of soul. Soul 1, psyche, soul, same thing. You can't do that because, well, what are billionaires spending their billions of dollars doing? Propagandizing people to say, oh, anybody who wants equality is bad, evil socialist. They're woke. They're Hezbollah or Hamas. Oh, they're naughty Nazis. What? No, they don't say Nazis. They like to be called Nazis now. They're anti-Semitic. They're un-American. They hate freedom. In other words, you can't, whether it's a politician, a spiritual figure, or anyone who claimed, or a dialectician, the highest art of individual souls, whether you're ruling one soul or many souls, you have to also recognize the counterattack from the various different classes of beliefs that can manifest as cultures, as religions, as political movements that will fight back, that function in a counterattack. So for every stage of development, you have to anticipate an equal and opposite opposing force of the counterattack. As the billionaires will try to murder people who want to do good things. Ever tried to have a good conversation with someone? Do they get mad? Do they act irrational? They try and start a fight when their beliefs are being challenged? So, because we are unfolding from rational, necessary first principles, first ideas, well, the one, all of these things, this is understanding. This will always be true. But you might find people who don't like it as they try and debate. Well, it's my opinion that blah, 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 blah. You shouldn't benefit. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. Get your bag and blow up the world in the process. I don't care. I'm a good Christian. I'm a good Mormon. I'm a good Jew. I'm a good MAGA. I'm a good capitalist. In other words, this isn't a matter of debate, which is the functioning of belief. It's there to be understood via dialectic. Okay, so as we see this principle of reality unfolding, and we could see, therefore we can look for another key term. Well, what have we said? As this is necessary and universal, we could take those words that talk about it being necessarily the way it is, to be good that it is the way it is, in that it allows for our return, our development, it allows for our perfection. It is something that can be understood. You don't have to fight a war to prove this. You don't have to convince anyone who's an idiot that this is true. the word that brings together these principles of necessity, rationality, goodness, justice. So we see all at once in the unfolding of creation, these primary ideas necessarily come to birth together, but still in a hierarchy. And to be seen inherent, notice you may not have seen it in the particulars, but when you turn around and reflect with understanding, you can discover there's justice there. You could also say, hang on a second, there's a kind of symmetry in between these levels. The pathologos of belief is kind of like a fake enlightenment experience where we get knowledge and perfect understanding, both of which are like the ultimate state beyond enlightenment, the recognition of self, to see self as it is via the logos. There's symmetry there. There's a balance there. So all of the qualities that we have been exploring in our looking and our when we explored analogy, proportion, flow, balance, order, what else? Symmetry, other things probably we can see are inherent here, or we could make a line in the middle using the mean term, as the one self is to the pathologos idea of the self. So in other words, we can take these the terms that relate to these two different ideas. As the self is to the logos, so too the image of the self is to the pathologos. There's an analogy. We could take that and arrange it according to all of the permutations of analogy that we did earlier in the book to discover, oh, there's an inherent beauty there that's to be seen. Maybe you can experience the beauty of everything all at once, but to understand and perceive that beauty, you have to do some sort of reflection. Did we do it ourselves at some stage? Surely we did. Here we go. So as A is to B, C is to B, that's the original or the verse. The verse is a fancy name for the beginning analogy. As the one self is to its logos, so to the image of ourself is to our pathologos. Or so to our ultimate goal is to our problems, so to our ultimate purpose, or destiny is the word for that, is to our fate. As our and we can discover the flow and the symmetry here and here. I think here is the symmetry, balance the outside into the inside, the proportion, all of the qualities of beauty. We could there see it, but also we could say, hang on a second, let's go back to the reality that unfolds. Again, this isn't a spiritual belief or a religious system or anything like that. It's justice, it's necessary, it's logic, rational and necessary. And where did I write it? Here. Is it? Yes. Oops. What happened? Why can't I undo it? Yeah. We could also see, hang on a second, as the one self unfolds into reality as the greater, so too reality unfolds the physical world. Or going back the other way in our understanding our human development, as we move from our beliefs gained from our physical senses to experience directly mind itself reality, so too can we make a double jump and use everything we've understood in perfecting what's true and purifying what's false to jump from this peak experience to that which is the cause of even experience, or that which is having experience. From our peak state of mind to attention itself, or awareness itself, or seeing itself. The greatest vision to sight itself. Meaning, in the unfolding of reality, we can see, could say, therefore, I should put it here. As the one self, as the first principle or cause, unfolds into mind itself with a capital or reality, so too mind / reality is to the physical world or realm. Which is, of course, A is to B, as B is to C, Diotima is to Socrates, as Socrates is to Agathon, or as the author is to us reading the book, so too to our friends who we are seeking to find out there in the world who might be interested in this. Self-mastery, art, benefit, development, which can also be said as A is to B is to C, which is a mean analogy. Which is handy because we saw that the most beautiful of all proportions, that we can see once we use understanding to unpack its parts and organize it using analogy. Where is it? Here. The mean analogy, as Diotima is to Socrates, so Socrates is to Agathon. We saw that there are 4 permutations of that. There are 8 of the regular analogy, but because there is 2 terms, there's a redundancy. And we looked at how this is the most beautiful. There's clear symmetry here and here if you fold it on itself. There's clear flow. A is to B is B is to C. C is to B is B is to A, back the other way. A is to B is B is to C, the same. C is to B is B is to A, same. It's perfectly comprised beautifully. Balance as the outside terms, the A's and the C's become the middle terms. Order, as we see A, B, B, A, B, B, A. What else do we see? The flow, A, B, another balance or order or flow. B, A, C, B, B, A, C, B in the middle terms. Couldn't get much better than that. Therefore, in our reflection on what necessarily, so let's write the word necessary. Where is it? Oh, it's up here. I forgot.
Okay, well, I think you should suck my dick and balls. My metaphorical dick and balls.
Well, if it's metaphor, then it's what we're talking about.
You probably want to put your grandma in the basement.
No. These are all bad ideas. So we saw what led to justice. We saw the rational, necessary, unfolding of this rational, necessary, allowing for a sort of a goodness following some sort of order, justice. Equally so, these principles of the mean analogy, as we just saw, beauty. So we see all in the purple, all of the inherent ideas, justice, beauty, the goodness ones, ultimate, greater, lesser, the triad, one, many, whole, parts, same, difference, like, unlike, unfold necessarily in creation. And as we want to become Agathon following Socrates to reach Diotima, so too we as human beings go from our beliefs into understanding and knowing or wisdom to reach the one self mastery of the self logos. That's our standard. So if you wanted to look at other traditions, let's look at other spiritual traditions. Religions, they don't do any of that. They venerate the ignorance of belief. They're the worst. They suck. Eastern spirituality, they may seek an experience of the mean term, the enlightenment experience, but they don't go through the process of freeing yourself from the lesser term, burning your karma, philosophical midwifery. And because theirs isn't an understanding tradition, it's not philodainoia, they can't use that understanding to go on and reach the ultimate. That's the difference between what we do, well, the standard of spirituality, philodainoia, love of understanding, and Eastern spirituality and religion. Therefore, we could rank them hierarchically towards the ideal in all of the different variations. Neat. Okay, so that's worth doing. Isn't that cool? Worth practicing with your friends? Worth a cup of coffee? But also, if this is rational necessarily and good, this order that unfolds, or justice, and the other determinant of what we use in the dialectic to see whether or not something's true, hey, it necessarily has to be that way, and there's also a beauty that unfolds. Or, if we don't do it, absurdities, contradictions, hypocrisy, and ugliness, injustice, horrors, inequality. That's our standard for in a dialectic to see whether or not the idea is true. And we also see, therefore, in this unfolding, we see the principles for analogy up here. But also, we've been talking about one and many, we've ignored the self. We could also say, gives rise to the root idea of self and other. Therefore, we have what we need for the dialectic. You have self and other to arrange its combinations. As we combine the combinations up here for analogy, we can combine the combinations for what color? Dialectic. Self to other, self to itself. Definition. Self to other. Demonstration. Other to other, and other back to self. division, and conclusion. And of course, justice and beauty. Oh, the levels of reality. As you explore an idea, you apply these to the idea if it is and if it isn't. Reality, the self that is, and the physical world, the self that isn't, the world of beliefs. And of course, there's the higher functioning of the dialectic to go beyond that, to use both to reach the one self. There's the two kinds of dialectics, exploring an idea like beauty, if it is and isn't, but also, hey, can you use both of those to reach, allowing you to reach the experience of the beauty of reality, to wonder if there's a beauty beyond that. And as we explore the ideas, how do we know whether or not one's true? Well, justice and beauty come up. To see the justice or the necessity for it to be, or the injustice if you take the opposite. If you imagine a world where beauty is all relative, you can see the lesser. You see injustice, or an irrationality, or an absurdity, or a beauty that follows. B-A-U-T-Y. Or its deviations. There's a harmony that results, or an order, or a balance, or flow. If the thing is, or when we explored what happens if beauty isn't, lack of harmony, injustice, division, genocide, lack of beauty. So in other words, what we saw here unfolds the key ideas necessarily. Putting them together, we have what we need for analogy, and putting them together, we have what we need for dialectic. So giving rise to the idea of dialectic and analogy. Therefore, we have everything we need for our own self-development. As we participate in analogy and dialectic as our activities, using all of these self-logos terms that have unfolded, we can ourselves perfect our beliefs and perfect our understanding and purify our beliefs. Philosophical midwifery in removing what's false. Philodianoia in applied to what we've been reading, and then bringing the two together to reach the cause of both, to discover the inherent intelligibility within that which isn't experienced, that which is doing the experiencing or having it. Attention, the inherent self logos. It's all necessary. If there's anything, you need one and many, giving rise to these other ideas, allowing for the expression of those ideas in some sort of, well, if there's a creation, it has to be some way like the creator. There has to be something doing the creation. So there's our principle of creation, same and different, one and many, like and unlike. And the creation has to be like, if the principle of likeness is what is creation is based on, and the thing that it's like has a quality of creation, then that which it makes has to have something like that. Therefore, necessarily, the creation has to create, because that's a quality that it is like, and likeness, same and different, one and many, is the principle of creation. Therefore, there has to be at least 3 dimensions. Allowing us to understand why the peak experience of enlightenment is called the most real, or the greatest experience of beauty or justice or whole or reality, all of these words, and why it's not the ultimate. So all of these are, once again, a logical, rational necessity, allowing for a goodness if we follow that order, or justice. Meaning you don't have to convince any idiot. Like the game Fascist plays, you can't have wealth equality. You can't put an end to genocide unless you'd convince me in a debate. And I am the one asking the questions, and I don't want to change my mind. And I have talking points from billionaire war machine people, or oil companies, or Jewish Zionist lobbies. So I don't want to change my mind, and I will yell at you and convince people to hate you or kill you if I want to. You don't have to do that bullshit. Fuck that. You have to convince anyone. There's not a belief. It's a rational necessity that unfolds a goodness through an order. It's necessarily the way it is, justice, and it's beautifully the way it is. So that's neat. Worth practicing. Hey, if you find someone who is seeking to... I went to pick up my pen, I hit the wrong button.
You're gay if you don't give me everything.
I'm not
Eating
gay.
bananas is evil.
What? Bananas is evil? I don't think so.
I'm not an idiot. That's what keeps you in
Keeps you
the
in
Matrix.
The Matrix.
Suck my dick. Hello?
Oh, well, you're very adamant about bananas being evil. I don't think so.
Dumbass.
Oh, okay, maybe you're right. So, yeah, so we are there for ourselves, because this is, what did we just unfold? The rational, necessary, just, beautiful unfolding of what was inherent within attention itself, allowing us to experience in our peak experiences a reflection of ourselves in a reflection in an unfolded creation. And also in the physical world with our problems, we get to experience what happens if it isn't. To show, oh, that self that has all of this inherent rationality is good. Because if you don't have it, it sucks. It's fucking Nazis. It's suffering. It's wealth inequality. It's injustice. It's ignorance. It's all the ups, all the downs that we have. Sadness, loneliness, misery. So, you don't want to give up the self, then the recognition of the self logos, but also, hey, here is it in the mirror. That's how great it is in our peak experiences. Therefore, by contrasting our greater experiences with our lesser experiences, we are discovering something through understanding about the inherent intelligibility of the self, which is called the self logos. Therefore, if this is nothing other than everything we've gotten on the board, look at the lovely colors. If that's the self logos, we are right now doing it. We are perfecting ourselves, our own, where we rest our attention, we're resting it on the self logos, which is the ultimate ideal. Or, when discussing the greater, so this would be, I guess, the unfolding of reality, so this would be the mind logos. So we are resting our attention on the ideal of mind. By focusing our attention, the self, and our state of mind or thinking on the mind logos and the self logos, we are and functioning both. So it's our attention, our state of mind, and the third thing, 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
Our functioning. We are doing this, we're talking about this, we're drawing it on the board. There's our functioning of the self logos. We are, as a whole, or one, perfecting ourselves by becoming more like the self by participating in the self logos. In other words, we are perfecting ourselves as well as gaining an understanding to be able to make these judgments about the ideal, both what is true and what is false, and to be able to make the distinctions as we perfect or have problems. So not only are we perfecting ourselves by putting our state of mind, our attention, and our functioning or understanding on the mind logos and self logos, or in the pathologos, its distortion, we're also developing the art we are here to develop as well. So we're perfecting our functioning as well as our state of mind and state of being, or state of self. Attention, state of self. Mind, state of being. Understanding, mastership. The art. That's our functioning. There's our 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
Therefore, we can say the functioning of these two here. There's our dianoia and mastership and art in its functioning, which is nothing other than to help in the development towards the mind logos or from the mind logos to the self logos. And also recognizing that there's the counterforce of belief as well. So it's also the functioning that allows for that perfection and the purification of the other. Whereas the ideal of what's false, the pathologos, is the root cause of all human problems. It functions through everything we've been discovering in the text about belief. Interpretation, projection and blind spots, debate, conflict, division. Well, that would be conflict, wouldn't it? Conflict or division. Cognophobia, a fear of letting go of our beliefs. Cogniphobia, to develop into knowing and understanding. And also the source of all human problems. I'm missing an idea. Cognophobia, division, debate, same sort of thing. Conflict, yes. Prejudice, to be ruled. So we can say all human problems. In the way of functioning of the, so 1, 2, 3, state of self, state of mind, and functioning. The functioning of the false idea of self and false belief of reality, or belief in our image, false belief and image of self and reality. That's the pathologos. Therefore, we are perfecting ourselves. We are perfecting ourselves by doing this on the stream. That's the whole stream, to perfect our soul towards the ideal. To recognize the inherent self. to have the greatest state of mind and model of beauty and excellence as the model of the ideal of mind, and also our masterful art through Dianoia. But also we are surfacing as the Oracle tells us.
You're not going to magically force someone to want to get better. You have to come to that
you
conclusion
have to
yourself.
Come to that
you
conclusion.
have to want to get better.
Want to get better. That's not the right one. This one.
When you're in a state of wanting to improve, you start perceiving all problems.
As we are improving or perfecting, now that we've understood what perfecting and improving is, we start to perceive all the problems, or we surface our problems in the counterattacks. We were in problems because we allowed it to rule. That's prejudice. But now we don't listen. We don't listen as a slave. Oh, I guess it's right. It sounds right. I guess I do suck. I guess you can't reach knowledge. I guess reading is stupid. I guess all women do hate me. I guess the whites are the best or whatever. I guess the Jews are the chosen people. We don't listen to it in rulership because we've recognized it, but we do surface it so that we can apply analogy to unpack its message, so that we can purify ourselves from what's false. Surface our problems in the counterattack so that we can therefore purify. To perfect and purify, that's our job. Neat. Worth recognizing. So all of the fundamental terms. So this isn't a religion because you don't have to believe this. It's justice, rational necessity. Either see it or you don't. That's not true. It's not that whether you see it or you don't. You either see it or you don't, or you're fighting against your seeing of it, the counterattacks. Either way, this will always be true for any culture, any species, any group, any political party. You can judge based on what level of development of soul towards the mind and self-logos and masterful functioning, and what level of nasty-ass belief towards the principle of the ideal or the principle of the pathologos. That is the causing all of our problems. You can't solve problems without also addressing the cause of the problem. You have to find the cause. So you can't just stop Nazis by a war. You have to find out what caused the Nazism in the first place. Because now you've got Trump, more Nazis. Elon Musk, more Nazis. The Zionistic Jews of that religion, or that variation of the religion. More Nazis. Again, capitalism, religion, or capitalism, clergy, and conservatism. Can you see my comment? I can see your comment. It's a very good comment. Congratulations.
I'm Benny Dorito. I'm cool. I'm a cool guy.
You're a cool guy. You're like Benny Dorito, I would say. Perhaps. Now, so what? Well, the inherent beauty unfolding necessarily that we can perceive ourselves rationally without having to convince anyone, or convince your parents, or convince your pastor, or convince your imam or rabbi. We can also see reflected in what we did last episode. We were ourselves bringing together all of these ideas of mastery, that analogy unfolded to us in our own understanding. Yes, religion itself, not your religion, Chatter. Chatter asks, your religion? No, religion itself. Religion means to be ruled by belief, which, if you go through the text, you'll realize is prejudice. You don't want your doctor to be ruled by belief. You better hope he actually understands medicine. Not just some confident guy that said, well, God told me that I should make the incision above your pancreas. Fuck off. Get understanding. Come back when you've got some understanding about medicine. Same thing with flying a plane. You don't want to fly a plane based on vibes and beliefs. You don't want your architect to build your house based on beliefs. Why then do we allow beliefs to rule politics in conservatisms? Spirituality with belief, which are religion, which means to be ruled by belief, and capitalism. Are you a Christian or Muslim? What part of what I said did you not understand? If you understood what I said, you wouldn't be asking that question. What part of you don't want your doctor or mechanic or architect or pilot to be using belief to rule your body, your house, your engine, your plane? You want them to have understanding, right? Do you agree? Do you disagree with any of those points? Do you want some crazy crackhead to say, well, I believe I'm a doctor. Give me the scalpel. Or do you want to make sure he's gone to college to develop understanding? Right? Get it? I'm asking, just answer. No, I'm asking. You answer what I ask. Because I'm the one giving the fucking stream. What are you, a fascist? I'm explaining. Do you want a crackhead who just believes he knows medicine to perform surgery when you've got a exploded gallbladder? Or do you want understanding? Do you recognize the difference between belief and understanding, first of all, to gauge where you're at? Like, anyone can say, I believe I'm a doctor, right? You don't need to have any understanding or demonstrate any understanding. Whereas there's medical school where you develop understanding. You can see the difference between belief and understanding, right? You with me? You pick up what I'm laying down? A simple distinction. There are two ways human beings can function: belief in time, belief and understanding. So, in a similar way, we were engaged in understanding to bring all the pieces together about what we saw was needed in actual mastery, to actually be qualified. Not just, well, I believe I'm an expert, I'm gonna start a fucking religion. I believe women suck. Meh. I believe we should murder the Palestinians. I believe we should kill the Muslims. I believe I should get all the money. I just believe it, bro. That's, of course, the stupid cause of all human problems. We were doing the opposite, being good people, by taking everything we learned in what it means to actually be qualified, actually function as a ruler, actually benefit the subjects, and we were doing a dialectic Someone's knocking on my door. I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, well, you can learn. Be right back. So, here we are. Back at it again on the wrong screen. Fuck.
There's got to be some smoothies that don't have bananas in them.
There's got to be. I think there's got to be. So we've used the dialectic to bring together all of the elements or aspects of both the terms and relations. There are two things, isn't there? Things and relationships. Relationships into our understanding as a whole. that we can then use to perfect our own mastership. Dialectic on mastership. The dialectic itself has a demonstration step. So, def, dem, div, conc. Demonstration step was a dialectic of the mastership present, level of mastership present of the interviewer, of the not the politician, which is a fantastic illustration of where we are as a society. Our leaders and rulers are the most ignorant because we haven't yet recognized the difference between belief and understanding, even though they're the two primary functions we engage in as human beings in time. Fortunately, we have this book, top 3 books that are must-reads for every human being. That allows us to discover that there are these two things, cause of problems and its solutions. But there are those who don't have any power or who have less power within the structures of society, who do try and influence the whole for the better. Like this channel. I don't have the 50,000 viewers of Asmongold, mostly bots I hear, and Hasman Piker. But many are saying I should. Many are saying...
Shut up for a second, please.
No, many are saying that I should.
I love this guy.
Yeah, because they love this guy.
Honestly, I feel really inspired.
Yeah, I'm very inspiring.
I think you're a babe.
And well, I mean, I wouldn't say it. But if the oracle's right about everything else, then well, I mean, right?
I'm gonna get your ass.
Hey, okay, calm down. Mastership present in the interviewer. Interviewer of the politician, which is again very apt where we are. How many TikTok or Instagram content creators are way more intelligent and caring and masterful than the sociopathic billionaire Epstein class who are bombing children for fun and profit? Have you ever, did anybody see the correspondence dinner of the fascist Trump regime? Not one right-winger made a joke. They can't. They're so fucking stupid. They can't do anything good, be it fixing a reflecting pool or feeding people that they're supposed to care about, providing healthcare for everyone, housing for everyone, the necessities for everyone. They can't even make a fucking joke. That's why there's no right-wing comedians. And when they got stuck on stage, they all just went back to, I'm bombing. Hey, don't we hate good people? Don't we hate people? Don't they suck? Don't women suck? Ha 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 ha. Go back to all they can do is hate, hurt. So interview, the mastership present in the interviewer was itself a dialectic, as she demonstrated her definition of the ideal, either intuitively or explicitly within her own seeing, of what the politician is, how it demonstrates to judge or diagnose what level this person was, good enough, better than, well, you know, good heart and not as sadistic as all of the other establishment Dems, corporate Dems, and the entire right-wing fascist party. There is no right-wing political party, it's just the Pathologos party. Diagnosis. Oh, we've been saying that since the start of the channel. Were we right too early? Can everyone see it now? Is it obvious? That there's nothing good at all, ever, about the right wing? Ever? In any way? Has Trump made that clear? Division? Was able to give a treatment plan. To some sort of goal or conclusion. Which was to benefit his ideas and to use her natural charm and grace and beauty and pleasantness to benefit his ideas, but also encourage continued dialogue. As we've been saying, this isn't a one-off. It's a relationship. He needs to want to enjoy coming back, but also reflecting on ideas, including the ideas that they mentioned. So a dialectic within a dialectic. So while that was the division, the demonstration or the example, demonstration, definition, demonstration, division, and conclusion in our dialectic, the division stage for her involved another dialectic. We're, of course, just to remind ourselves, hey, here's this is just an example. Many ideas were explored in a similar way. Hey, you seem to be wanting to help people, and you seem to be interested in learning and understanding and being rational. Here's a definition of an idea you might benefit from. Definition. What's it called? Decommodification. Hey, if the natural law is to benefit the subjects, and capitalism is specifically to harm the fucking subjects to benefit you, capitalism is itself, in principle, opposing the natural law and will lead to extinction. It is injustice. That's what it is. It is, by definition, injustice. Our goal, therefore, is to remove from capitalism anything we need. Ultimately, everything. But we can start with the decommodification, which means it's not a business. You don't use it to harm the people. Like healthcare shouldn't be a profit-based business. Neither should housing. Decommodification of a necessity like housing. Demonstration. An example, just like she was an example herself of mastership. China. Chinese housing policy. As an example of it working. Division. The steps, so treatment plan or the steps of reasoning. To explain. And the conclusion is, therefore, either justice and beauty. So an aspect of justice, it's either necessary. They will just keep buying houses and just keep jacking up the price till everyone's fucking homeless. Therefore, it's necessary. Or an aspect of beauty. We are more harmonious within ourselves. We're more balanced. We can live a more beautiful life. There's greater harmony. If it is, remember, there's if it is, and if when you do a dialectic, there's if it is and if it isn't. So you could also do a dialectic of the other side. In other words, here's a definition of what if this idea isn't, because a dialectic is if it is and if it isn't. What's the opposite of this? Capitalist housing. What's that called? Slumlords, exploitation, slavery, indentured servitude, demonstration. What is that, like millions of homeless people and 4 times as many empty apartments? Divisions. Here is the explanation of what happens under this allowing the commodification of housing, and the conclusion, what happens in that world. But if you are using the dialectic, you can, in a conversation, you can pull from either category. So she could have, she chose to define the idea she wanted to do, to give an example of when it does work. You can do both. This is the housing. Hey, we could compare it to the other side of the dialectic. American housing system, doesn't it suck? Steps of reasoning either side as well. And the conclusion, to either show that it is a element of justice and beauty, those primary terms that unfolded from reasoning about the necessity of creation, if it is, or an injustice, or a hypocrisy, or an absurdity, or an opposite of necessity, absurdity. And the opposite of beauty, what's the opposite of beauty? Ugliness? Homelessness. That follows if it isn't. If decommodification isn't present in the universe that we are creating. Why is that important? His job is to create that universe, to influence society, to create a world where the idea is or isn't. Therefore, the ideal politician, dialectician, to explore the ideas, whether they are or isn't, with reference to all of the terms of mastership, the ideal, to improve, to allow for the development of also the souls within. Make sure that the souls go through this process, purifying, so making sure our schools teach about belief and teach about the logos. So, just as there is a inherent beauty within the unfolding sameness or likeness of, as the logos of the self is to the logos of mind, is to the pathologos of belief, logos within logos, baby. So too, in our activity yesterday, it was a very long stream, but it was very, very good. There was a similar dialectic inside a dialectic inside a dialectic inside a dialectic. So that's what we did last time. And remember, there's the thing, and then you have to reflect on the thing. So we did the thing last time. It was a big review, bringing together and in the dialectic our understanding of mastery, But we have to reflect on it. And in doing so, we recognize, oh, there was an inherent beauty in what we did yesterday. A symmetry between the dialectic of what we were doing, and within which was a dialectic which was a demonstration, within which was another dialectic which was the division. And as a result, we came to a conclusion. Here is a summary of it. In our definition of what mastery is via our exploration of analogy, we gave a demonstration, an example of mastery, the interviewer of Ollie McOllipants. I forget his name. I think it was Oliver something. Division. So that's my bad. I'm sure he's been doing very well. I don't know what he's doing. I'm not having a go at him. He seems the best of the people out there, or in the better class at least. It's worth supporting and all that. So we were giving a definition for ourselves: mastery via exploring analogy, demonstration, example, division. Oh yeah, yesterday we explained all this step by step to a new listener, a new viewer. We used a Dark Souls analogy. We explored all this via analogy. How do I get into philosophy? Do you mean no beliefs? What about my masks? What do I do? As the Weird Chatter said today, you don't have belief, don't you support anything? He asked a similar question. Without belief, there's no meaning, right? How can we seek important goals without believing some jerk? And of course, all of the questions that his own participation in that dialectic was to the level that he wasn't believing some jerk. Or Barry the Hollow. In the Dark Souls movie, there's always a hollow at one of the early parts of the game that has given up. I don't know why I'm here. You gonna figure it out? No. Ever met a human being? Do you know why you're here? I don't know why I'm here. Gonna figure it out? No. That's what belief's for, to stop the question. So went through the divisions, leading someone in to the game. And as a result, came to a conclusion. The conclusion we came to at the end of it last episode was, as a result of exploring this, we saw there were 4 necessary axioms to play the game. Excellence is reachable via the logos. Problems are solvable via the pathologos. You get guidance from a master via your dream analysis, and your ultimate goal can be explored by reflecting on the dream maker himself. There are 4 necessary axioms, or to be ruled by understanding, of human development to reach the ideal self-logos. So we also recognize that the ideal, mind logos, has an even greater ideal, the self-logos. The 4 necessary axioms of human development to reach the ideal self-logos, which is the mastery of all mastery, but also requires the dialectic. Therefore, the ideal self-mastery is achieved via 4 axioms, analogy, and dialectic. So this is another demonstration, because as a result of this whole episode last time, the conclusion is, got it wrong. Other, back to self. Definition, self, demonstration, that self to others, divisions, others to others, conclusion is other back to self. So we take what we saw as the conclusion and we relate it back. We started with simply understanding mastery via analogy. But by going through this thing, reflection via the dialectic, we realize that more about mastery. Mastery is mastery of the ideal self-logos. That's the mastery we're here for. All other masteries could therefore be ranked relative to that ideal. We gained more of an understanding about that first definition. We also realized it's not just reached by analogy, but also the 4 axioms in dialectic. That's the dialectic used to, you start at a position, you go through some reflection, and you end up with a better definition. So this can be our starting definition of a new dialectic as we continue to read. That upward movement is called anagogic. The opposite of belief. My mummy told me that we are the chosen people, and I'm telling you that. My mummy punched me for asking questions about holy books. I'll punch my kid. There's no change. It's stagnant. A is to B is A is to B. So the redundant or stagnant analogy is the fake ousia of belief, the imitation of development. Hey, I've grown. I was once a follower of my whatever religion. Now I'm a pastor. I've really developed. No, you're not. You're just A is to B doing the same thing that was A is to B done to you. You haven't added, you haven't improved, you haven't learned anything more. You're just doing the same, repeating the same talking points on Fox News. Same thing. Notice all of the lies that justify capitalism is, well, the opposite. They are innovators. They make society better. No, they don't. They do the exact literal fucking opposite. They don't add anything. They do the harm that their daddy did to their slaves. They do unto their workers the same harm that their business is doing to society. They have to lie to justify rulership by belief, because rulership by belief is injustice as it breaks the natural law. So that's the stagnant analogy of A is to B is A is to B, compared to the anagogic analogy that we experience right here. That is, we end up greater than we started. Learning about this first idea, mastery, is actually the ideal self-logos. And learning about what's involved. Not just analogy, but also the 4 axioms and the dialectic. So, hooray, hooray, hooray. Pretty awesome. Not once did we have to read a holy book. Not once did we appeal to authority. Not once did anyone say, but have you read Heidegger? Have you read Nietzsche? Have you read Kierkegaard? Didn't have to read all these stupid books by stupid people and pretend, well, you can't understand reality unless you've read 1,000,000 books. Like a fucking nerd. Didn't have to do any of that. Didn't have to debate some idiot. We didn't have to appease a group. Well, we've got a nice interview here. You're a Jew. Well, we have to pretend that Jewishness is okay. You're a capitalist? Well, actually capitalism is wonderful as well. And everything is nothing. Didn't have to do any of that. Much more fun, much more real, much more honest, much more meaningful. And of course, perfecting our self-mastery. Hooray! That's why we have so many viewers. So, let's keep reading. We finished by recognizing that when we do use analogy to compare two things, we also gain more of an understanding of that thing itself. The fog was like a comforting cloak of obscurity. In other words, a fog is obscure. You would never see that about a cloak. A cloak is comforting. You wouldn't see that about a fog, but it's kind of there that you can only bring to light if you made these comparisons. A fog is like the coat. Therefore, the fog brings its obscuring nature to the cloak, and echoing back The cloak makes the fog seem comforting. Her mind had a rare clarity to it, like the radiance of a clear winter's night. Ever met someone who herself has a radiance, but also a clear clarity in her thinking? Oh, using an example today. How can the two fit together? Radiance isn't clear. Winter's night can be clear. Oh. Analogy helps us to see what's there to be seen, which is important because we want to, if our conclusion was what we're here for is to develop our ideal self-mastery of the self-logos, which is attention itself, or awareness itself, seeing itself. There's no experience. It's only through analogy that we can discover what's there to be seen. Without analogy, you wouldn't have seen it. Only what we've discovered is ultimately you can bring all of the analogies you can make self-mastery, or the self-logos, by taking the two terms of the dialectic. The self that is, or mind logos, reality itself, eternity itself, mind logos, and the self that isn't, the pathologos of belief. There's our dialectic. So after doing dialectic on all of those different ideas, beauty, all of those, literally all of these purple words that have come to birth, one and many whole parts, like, unlike, justice, beauty, ultimate, greater, lesser, dialectic, analogy, benefit, art. These are all aspects, notice they're not from the physical world, they're all qualities inherent in mind or reality, such that they apply to every physical culture, world, time, etc. Therefore, they're all subjects for the dialectic. Which allows us to, on one level, purify the idea that it's all relative, that beauty doesn't exist, or it's just an opinion, and perfect our understanding of why it's necessarily and beautifully so, leading to the direct experience, because this is formally a contemplation of that idea. So that's meditation. There's our peak experience, or experience directly, mind that is, or a perfection of your mind, mind 1, mind 2, mind 3, through the dialectic to directly experience the self that is, and to purify yourself through again, it's a relationship. We keep coming back, as the interviewer reminded us. Purify. Therefore, as you do dream analysis and philosophical midwifery on your problems, you get rid of problem 1, problem 2, problem 3, until you recognize that all of those problems are samenesses and different expressions of the single pathologos. Once you, again, likeness, sameness, whole, identity of the whole. Likeness, more sameness, less difference, until you see the thing as a whole. Only when you reach the pathologos as a whole, by unifying all its terms within the set, you don't directly experience it, you have a freedom from it. There's your clarity. There's your clarity. On the other side, as you go through this aspect of the dialectic, perfecting your mind towards mind that is, there's your radiance. So as we read, the radiance and clarity, her mind had a rare clarity to it, like the radiance of a clear winter's night. Two kinds of peak experiences are included in that example. The clarity when you reach this purification, and the radiance when you reach this. So there's our dialectic. But we also recognize that if the self logos is the inherent intelligibility of attention itself, awareness itself, watchingness itself, we have to use both of those in analogy to discover what's inherent of your own attention that you can never experience, because it's not an experience. Only by analogously reflecting the clarity reached from the pathologos and the luminosity reached by the mind logos, the self that is, can you say, hey, attention itself had a rare clarity of one free of the pathologos and a divine radiance of one who's recognized self. Only this recognition of direct experience through direct experience of self is analogously, it's not an experience. This freedom from pathologos doesn't apply. It transcends the pathologos. It's causes, it's a primary cause. So you can say it's the radiance and clarity of the self that is and the freedom of the self that isn't. Hang on a second, radiance and clarity, they're qualities. The ideal self logos is itself beyond qualities. So how can we use the ideal quality of radiance and clarity to describe that which is beyond qualities? Therefore, we need analogy. It isn't luminosity. It's like a luminosity in a greater way. It's not clarity. It's like clarity in a higher way. But it is clarity, because it's still an analogy. It is luminous, because it's an analogy. It just has to be a greater kind of clarity than this and a greater kind of luminosity than this. In a different way. Therefore, the ideal self-mastery through the recognition and direct encounter of or mastery of the self-logos is achieved through the dialectic, giving us these things that we can then use as an analogy to know the self. And also you need to follow the 4 axioms to get to that stage where you can actually, the axiom 1, this is reachable. Axiom 2, this is reachable. The clarity of the freedom from pathologos is reachable by going through this set. Axiom 3, your dreams are a guide. And Axiom 4, you can compare the analogy you are making to the self with the ultimate master, the dream maker. Pretty neat. Therefore, the principle or archetype of the spiritual tradition has to involve dialectic and analogy. It also has to involve the 4 primary axioms to begin, so you can learn dialectic and analogy. And has to recognize that the ideal self-mastery is of the self-logos. Now, the word self and the word logos are 2 words that have not been translated in Homer and Socrates or Plato up until the last recent decade because of the work of Juan Balboa, someone who has himself been going through this process and has translated. Therefore, if you're not reading the Balboa translations of Homer, Christopher Nolan, you won't discover its purpose and you won't be able to do your purpose. Same thing for the Balboa translations of Plato. Because you need you need the right words. Otherwise, what are you reading? And if you need a certain level of mastery to be able to translate the words of Socrates or Homer, we can also use this to recognize why all of the previous translations have been garbage. Because they just simply weren't at that level of mastery. But thankfully we have the Balboa translation. And of course we have the work of Pierre Grimes, which doesn't need a translation. Speaking of which, by the way, important to recognize, it's you, its attention itself. Is it worth paying attention to? How could it? You can't see it, can't hear it. Well, it can't be that great if it doesn't have any qualities, unless all qualities themselves have a purpose to apply analogously to it, so you can recognize something about it that was there only by echoing the quality of the analogy to it. It is like a clarity, it is like a luminosity in a more profound way. Worth doing analogy? Did somebody say this is a good book? What do you say?
Crazy hot babe.
Oh, could say that. It's a book though. It's a crazy hot book, I think you mean to say.
Would you like your pudding?
I would like some.
That's fucking insane, and you sound like a crazy person.
All right, I apologize for sounding crazy.
Dumb bitch.
Hey,
Jesus Christ, Emma, this is not Opie and Anthony or whatever the hell.
exactly. Don't say that. It's not Opie and Anthe or whatever the hell. All right. So while not expressing a sameness alone, analogy expresses a similarity called likeness. And this combines both in a way that sends echoes back to each of the terms. The idea of likeness is a principal idea in metaphysics. We discovered that ourselves, didn't we? One of these purple principal words of metaphysics. Here it is. You.
Just popped a perky, now I'm quirky.
We're all popping perkies. Now we're all kirkies.
That's funny.
That's kind of funny.
This guy he's a no joke, man.
Thanks. The study of metaphysics requires that you allow yourself to explore ideas in a new way. Was this new to you? The way that we explored those ideas? It is said to be simple and difficult. Super simple, but also took us 60 episodes to get here, or 57. Simple because if you reflect on each of these points in a metaphysical exploration, they should be simple. Simple enough for us to nail it down in our own understanding. But the simple for the wise may not be the simple for the fool.
Just popped a perky. Now I'm. Show the tits already. Jeez.
That's too many perkies, if that's what you're saying.
Dumb bitch.
Hey.
The woman? Ugh.
Hey, stop it.
Fuck.
A fool's simplicity might become wise if he were to endure the study of the simple, which is what we were encouraging our new chatter today to do, by making fun of the alternatives, which is to show. Do we write it up somewhere? Right. In the dialectic, we can show the absurdities that follow if he doesn't stick around and endure the exploration of these ideas in a new way that can lead to a simple understanding. We joked about him listening to Mr. Beast instead, and buying Mr. Beast bars, and buying his crypto scam. In other words, following someone who seeks to harm you instead of someone who seeks to do you good. So the absurdity of following Mr. Beast and the ugliness that follows if you do. So, that fool, even the fool, may become wise if he were to endure the study of the simple, but the fool's foolishness is in believing that doing that is foolish. There's the catch-22. You need to have enough intelligence to recognize the value of what we're doing and have enough character to endure the process until it becomes fun. Like learning anything else. Starts off difficult. Like streaming, you have to endure a couple of years of only having a few viewers until one day I'll have all of those followers of Asmongold and Hassan Piker. Is my prediction.
Boom. I love that.
So do I love that.
That might be my new favorite drop.
Yeah. So, to believe doing otherwise, that's the foolishness of the fool. Let us return to the idea of likeness and discuss it as Proclus does in his commentary to Plato's Parmenides. So that's where we were in the text. Let's pick it up. Let us return to the idea of likeness and discuss it as Proclus does in his commentary of Plato's Parmenides. So, just the timeline so we're all on the same page. Parmenides was, as Diotima taught in the Symposium, Diotima was the masterful, artful guide of Socrates in relation to seeking beauty. Okay. Prior to that, Parmenides was another teacher of Socrates who taught him the dialectic when Socrates was about 19, I think. And we do have a Balboa translation of Parmenides, and we have read the opening and the first hypothesis. There are 9 hypotheses. The first hypothesis is the logos of the one self. The next 4, definition, demonstration, division, and conclusion, are the 4 other ideas of self you might have if you think the self is. The next 4 hypotheses, again, def, dem, div, conc, if you think the self isn't. Giving us one self and the 8 other possibilities explained using all those same key terms that we have discovered ourselves. All those purple terms, he uses all of them to explain how the relationship between all these terms, same terms, different relationships, giving rise to all these different levels of reality and also perspectives, views, opinions that people could have. Therefore, we could go back into the Parmenides and rank use those standard archetypes of alternative beliefs about self, rank them here in terms of sickness. As we progress through those stages, we could therefore rank souls in their development towards the one self. Or the second hypothesis, the self that is, or the mind logos. So that's the Parmenides. Now, after the counterattack against Socrates by the believers, the religious, conservative capitalists of Athens, who murdered Socrates for sharing the truth, Plato started the first universities in the West, the Academy in Athens. And one of the head teachers of the Academy in the roughly 1,000 years that it existed before Christianity, again, clergy, Emperor Fuckface McGee, Emperor Justinian, shut down the Academy, murdered the philosophers, burnt the libraries, to install Christianity as a way of manipulating people, just like Trump does today. Exploits people through their beliefs, once again. So prior to the ending of that intellectual and spiritual tradition, Proclus was one of the head teachers, and he did a lot of work writing big commentaries on the works of the first head teacher, Plato. So that's Proclus, head teacher, commenting on Plato's works, the first head teacher, of Socrates, of the transcription of the conversation had between Socrates, Plato's teacher, who was murdered before Plato was able to learn philosophical midwifery. So if Plato was not able to do this, therefore he might not have been able to therefore reach the if he wasn't able to do this, he may not have been able to reach the self-logos that Socrates reached, because I think Plato was in his 20s when the believers murdered him, Socrates. So that's Socrates' conversation with Parmenides. So that makes sense of Proclus's commentary on Plato's Parmenides. Okay, now you're up to date. Well, now to begin, would you not agree that unless things could become like another, there would be no likeness among things? Or if things have become, or are, or will become like other things, the property of likeness must have a prior existence. Okay? So we have been reasoning about why the principle of likeness comes to be from top down, but you could also say from the bottom up, if things in the physical world become like one another or develop, there must be a prior existence of that principle of likeness in reality. And one more step. The likeness as an aspect or eidos, not forms, aspect of reality must be serving a purpose to tell us something about a kind of likeness inherent within self in a higher way that we could only see through analogy. So for things to become like other things, or have become, or will become, there must be that property of likeness existing prior for it to have a scope over physical things. Or stated another way, whatever is used existed prior to its use. So all the adjectives. By the way, all of these terms that we saw, we only experience as adjectives in our physical world. So we're experiencing the substantive or the noun in the mind logos. Whatever is used existed prior to its use. The condition for likeness must exist then for likeness to exist. Further, When anything becomes like the thing that it seeks, then the condition of likeness makes it possible for it to be like the model. So through likeness, we go through our stages of development to become like the mind logos, the ideal, or to see the pathologos as a whole and gain the clarity of that, or the self. Okay, so the condition of likeness allows for the development or the perfection as terms within the set towards the ideal or model. Anything that has become better or improves in any way does so by becoming like the thing it becomes like. There we go. Mastery. All the making, copying, or producing of anything is making it like the model of that thing. All things are like another thing. Wait. All things like another thing are so because of the condition that made the likeness possible. In other words, for us to become like the ideal that we are moving towards, there has to be some condition in reality that allows for perfection through mastership. The condition that makes likeness possible is what he's looking at now. Interesting. Is that something about the self? The self logos? The conditions for likeness itself? The conditions for? If all of these purple terms are used to describe aspects of mind or reality, are the conditions something inherent in the self? Are the conditions for all of these terms to be within reality your own, something about attention itself? Your own attention, awareness, seeing? Something to wonder about. As long as that condition persists or is maintained, then we can say that it is possible. Then we can say that it is the single tie that joins and holds all things together. Surely, when things become like... Oh, by the way, another way of saying the conditions, it might be, as we saw yesterday, all of these terms we can rank as aspects of the mind's intelligibility, or, here we go, the ideal of whole, part, same, different, like, unlike, one, many is the inherent intelligibility of reality, or the logos. I'm not sure whether he's talking about the mind logos as the inherent conditions for all of the qualities like likeness, or if he's talking about the self logos, the conditions for mind logos. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. I'm getting so excited. Oh my goodness, I need to calm down.
Dumb bitch.
Hey, I'm not a dumb
You probably want
person.
to put your grandma in the basement.
No.
So I guess you.
Oops. No grandma in basements. Surely when things become like, they share a common likeness, and they also have that commonness that joins them together. But each thing becoming like a model becomes more like its ideal or archetype. Each thing becoming more like a model becomes more like its ideal or archetype. So there's a new word that we haven't used. We haven't really been using model, but we could say model or ideal, but also archetype. New word for us. For the being of each thing is defined by its likeness to the intelligible model, the logos. And it's mind logos. And it's through being like its idea that each is what it truly is. Then likeness is the factor that perfects the being of each. Since perfection comes to each when it becomes like its intelligible form. By being like its idea, each is what it truly is. So not just in our perfection do we become like the ideal or archetype, but being like the idea allows us to be what we are. Isn't that interesting? There's something maintaining our existence as people, in that we are participating in some level of likeness to the idea of humans. Their likeness is the factor that perfects the being of each, since the perfection comes to each when it becomes like its intelligible form. Perfection being like its intelligible form. As a consequence of likeness being the condition for things to become like, we can say that all this perfecting of such things is conditioned by likeness. Perfection. Well, is perfection? Perfecting of things. Perfecting of such thing. Okay, Perfecting by likeness. The likeness of things in similar classes is expressed in and through analogy. And it is this factor that is called the natural property of analogy. Likeness of things in similar classes is analogy. So it's not the likeness that allows for things to exist. It's not the likeness that allows for our perfection. It's a likeness between similar classes. That's what's expressed in analogy. And it is this factor that is called the natural property of analogy. There's our name for what it is. The natural property of analogy is to show the similarity between classes. Keeping in mind our ultimate goal, to find the similarity between classes of the pathologos, the self that isn't, the mind logos, the self that is, or the self that is, the second hypothesis of Parmenides. The pathologos, the 10th hypothesis. Yes, we had to add a 10th after reading Socrates and Jesus, A Dialogue in Heaven. To find what's the, to compare both with the inherent intelligibility or the set of the self logos. Interesting. That's the property of analogy. To express the likeness between classes. So we could say the ultimate purpose of analogy is this class to that class and this class to that class. How do you see what's the, how can you recognize the significance of attention itself without not having any qualities? Then, anything made or created presupposes the condition of likeness. Since God's creation is often spoken of as being like himself, We used that ourselves earlier. We can say that the condition of likeness is made possible for the universe and man to be akin to himself. What? God's creation is like himself. That's the condition that made it possible for the universe to be like the God and man to be like God, I guess. But this is saying, so that's the evolution of the universe and our personal development, we would say, to become like the God or the self, the one self. First hypothesis of Parmenides. But this is saying, is it not, that the supreme originating cause of the universe is the principle of analogy. That sounds like a bumper sticker. The supreme originating cause of the universe is the principle of analogy. Kind of what we discovered. Yeah. Ew. And again, does it not follow that this principle must be logically prior to creation? Notice, we inferred its existence by looking at what necessarily has to unfold in creation. But he's gone one step further and saying, yeah, you inferred what must be prior. What does that say about ourselves? Or God? God, so the word God, or the highest idea of self, would be the one self for us. Not some guy in a cloud throwing thunderbolts or impregnating goats or whatever they do. In the story of gods. In various mythologies. And again, does it not follow that this principle must be logically prior to creation? And once again, does not the principle of analogy also allow and make possible the condition for linking or bonding together whatever is? Keeps things together in sets of likeness. Also allows things to exist by being like the model, and allows perfection to become by being like the ideal. Lots of bonds happening because of analogy. Plato grasped this in a superb manner when he said in the Timaeus, this is Plato, he sounds like this. Not like that. Plato sounds like this. And the most beautiful of bonds it is. Wait. And the most beautiful of bonds is that which most perfectly unites both one... The most beautiful of bonds, oh my goodness, is that which most perfectly unites into one, both itself and the things which it binds together. And to effect this in the most beautiful manner is the natural property of analogy. Which is interesting because we are binding together all of, well, the terms and relationships, but also analogy has to be bound into that same oneness. So as we've been saying, if analogy has to exist prior to creation for the unfolding of creation, it has to be itself an aspect of the inherent self-logos. It might be that which binds all of the things together. It might be the self-logos. Oh, so many puzzles, questions. However, must there not be a model and something produced like it for likeness to exist? In other words, for existence there has to be the creation of that which into existence for us to see that likeness. Interesting. Exist. Then model, copy, and likeness coming together are required for any creation. Model and copy. The model creates the copy using the principle of likeness. Any creation. Now, if the model is nothing other than God, self is using the self logos for creation, then in the act of creation, God looks to himself in producing the creation by looking at himself as the model. But that which he looks to as the model must itself have some kind of existence or mode of being, must it not? Otherwise, what's he looking at? Now, if that is the model, which we would call the mind of God, the divine intelligence, then whatever was the cause or condition for that must be called the creator of the model, must it not? Interesting. Interesting. So if there's a model used for creation, something that God looks to, we can say, well, hang on, whatever is the cause or condition of that model to exist must have created that model. Interesting. So then, in review, can we say there is God? There is the God that produced the intelligence. There is God who reflects on himself in creating, and there is the creation itself. Further, is not the reflecting on the model God contemplating the divine intelligence? Then these different ideas of God, or moments of the creative processes, are collectively the idea, capital I, of divine creation, which must have an existence prior to creation. Further, since these ideas are presupposed for creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the universe, they are the necessary condition for the universe. For as the Maker produces and creates what is evolving, the condition for that evolution must have a prior existence. For since the suspension of the conditions for evolving would bring an end to the universe. In other words, there seems to be some sort of creator God that looks upon a creator model and engages in an act of creation and causes a creation. But if that creation is perpetually unfolding to create each moment and maintain the system, there's a whole bunch of things happening. There has to be a prior set of principles that allows for this to happen. And if that was ever turned off, well, we wouldn't have the conditions for creation and evolution of our physical universe. So it sounds like we're seeing two levels. There's one level that's doing a whole bunch of stuff, contemplating divine intelligence as a model, engaged in an activity which involves qualities to creation, including the principle of likeness. So all this is happening on one level to create the physical world and maintain the principles of evolution. But all this stuff has to have a condition. So we got like two levels of divinity happening. Suspending the conditions for evolving would bring... Okay. For as the Maker produces and creates what is evolving, the conditions for that evolution must have a prior existence. For since the suspension of the conditions for evolving would bring an end to the universe, the factors necessary for its evolving must remain in place. Thus, these ideas that are necessary for creation can be said to gain their continued existence from the continued reflection of God on the idea of creation, which is to say, God's continuing contemplation of the idea of creation sustains and directs the universe. So the conditions for our physical world is somehow in this act of creation, and you can't be creating without contemplating a model. So if God stops reflecting on the model of creation or his own divine intelligence, we would have suspended all of the physical world's creation of principles and conditions for its evolution and sustaining it. Meaning, there is a level of reality where there is a kind of God that contemplates its own intelligence as the model and uses that to create and sustain the universe and the conditions of the universe. So we've discovered necessarily, for creation to exist, there has to be a level of divine reality eternally contemplating divine intelligence. Eternity, or that which exists eternally. That's what we were in after when we said the self that exists. Or ultimate reality, perpetually it there. It has to be. Otherwise, there wouldn't be an evolving universe. Therefore, we can call this idea, capital I, in the mind of God, the first creation, and the universe, the second. And both are sustained by the creative contemplation of God. So, for all of these conditions for creation, causes of creation and conditions of creation, there has to first be some model which is contemplated. So that would be the first creation. And that contemplation of the model creates the causes and condition for the creation of the physical universe. So we can ask, what caused the model? What was the causes and condition of that model that God's contemplating? So the first creation is the idea in the mind of God. God contemplating his own intelligence. Or self. For us. How did that creation come to be? Without all of the principles of likeness and model and copy and stuff that it's using, because it is the model, what caused that? What kind of creation gives rise to the first creation? Giving the causes and conditions for this kind of creation, model and copy, likeness. Well, I am puzzled and confused. I don't even know if I've understood it properly. All I've got is a bunch of confusion and a bunch of questions, which is exactly where we need to be. We spent a few episodes nailing down into our own understanding, mastery and dialectic and the ideal. So now it's time to get all puzzled and confused all over again. So next time we'll be continuing to explore this idea. Maybe you will have some dreams between now and then that might give you some direction towards this luminosity of contemplating the idea or intelligence itself. Or maybe clarity from any false images of self and reality that might block you. Or maybe using either of those two sets to wonder about what's the cause even of that idea of even intelligence. I don't know. Only one way to find out. Have fun exploring your dreams. Have fun being puzzled. Have fun sharing this, either these puzzles or what we've brought together in our own dialectical understanding of mastership and our ideal purpose, and why it requires both dialectic to nail down the two sets that allow us to use analogy to contemplate what's inherent in the highest idea of God, the self. Does this understanding of the ideal state of mind reflect the idea, the model? God contemplating itself as the model? Is that the self that is? Does it therefore generate the physical world of appearances, creating the conditions for us learning false beliefs and the pathologos? Is our purpose to go through the perfection of one and the mastery of the other, so that we can use everything we learnt in that process of our development as terms to use that principle of likeness to glean something inherent about what must exist in self for there to be the first creation and the second? The conditions for reality and the physical universe going through its state. Being, constantly contemplating itself, or pure being, and the physical world going through changes, evolution, becoming more like the ideal, becoming, being and becoming. Being is to the first cause, God or oneself. In what way? Becoming is to it in what way? Are you as puzzled as I am? Seems to be part of it. Thanks for joining me. I hope you had fun. Worth doing, worth sharing with your friends, worth wondering what your dream maker, master, now we might call it Dream Master, has to say. If you want to donate to the channel, there's a link below. If you want to join the Discord, you'll get a notification when we go live. Thank you for joining me. Have lots of fun. And I'll see you in the next one. And then I press the button. That doesn't work half the time. Yes. Bye.